All right. Our next component of internal control is control procedures. Now, we are not going to spend a ton of time on this right now because we have several slides related to some specific control procedures. But again, we want to emphasize, and this is a recurring theme when it comes to internal control, auditing, these types of things, provide reasonable assurance. Remember those words, that business goals will be achieved, including the prevention of fraud. But we're not guaranteeing the prevention of fraud. We're providing reasonable assurance here, okay? So there's a whole lot of information on your slide. We're going to get to some of this a little bit more specifically, so I'm going to go ahead and move on at this point. All right, so monitoring. We can have the most perfect internal control system in the world, but if we don't monitor it, we don't know if it's really being used. We don't know if it is out of date. We don't know if it has weaknesses. Maybe something has changed. This system was great 6 months ago, but business processes have changed, and now our system has weaknesses. We have to observe employees. Are they adhering to the internal control processes? And I mean, not only are they using them at all, but are they implementing internal controls correctly? Is our accounting system producing the right types of indicators of control problems? In other words, if we have unauthorized access, is someone getting a report about that? Okay, so monitoring, again, is a very, very important component of internal control. Information and communication pertains to all aspects or the other 4 aspects or components of internal control. Management uses this process to ensure that what we're doing is still effective. Yes, we monitor the process, but we take the information that we obtain about all of these components, the control environment, what we've learned from risk assessment, what we're doing in terms of control procedures, and what we found out when we monitored our system, and we use that to improve our internal control process. Your slide also says that management also uses external information, and that is true. So when we talk about information and communication, we want to understand that this is information and communication pertaining to the other 4 components of internal control, plus any other information that we can integrate into that process to make internal controls more effective across the organization. All right, so we've got some principles of internal control activities, and when we say that, we're on that 3rd component, control procedures. So the first one here is establishment of responsibility, and it says, now we need to be careful here because we're going to have another principle that comes into play that might confuse you. But it says control is most effective when only one person is responsible for a given task. So we have a cash register or some kind of point of sale system here, and he says to her, it's your shift now. I'm turning in my cash drawer and heading home. So he was responsible for recording all the sales on this point of sale system up to a certain point in time. Now she is solely responsible for the next set of transactions. What we do not want is multiple people performing the same task. And when I say that, I mean we don't want both of these people going back and forth on the same register at the same time. That's just one example. So whose responsibility is it? Once we establish responsibility for a given task within an organization, only that individual should execute that task. Otherwise, we lose accountability. Now, segregation of duties, we have to be careful that we don't confuse establishment of responsibility and segregation of duties. You'll sometimes hear this referred to as separation of duties. They're the same thing. Now look what it says here. It says different individuals should be responsible for related activities. Okay, so we looked at a situation where one person is responsible for something very, very specific. However, what we don't want, let's think about this, we don't want the same person receiving payments through the mail and then also going in and reducing that, the customer's accounts receivable for those payments, and then making the deposit that goes to the bank, and so on, and then performing what we're going to look at a little bit called a bank reconciliation. This is a problem. Those are all related activities, but we need different people to do each one of those. Okay? So, segregation of duties, extremely, extremely important in any business. One issue with segregation of duties is that sometimes in a really, really small business, we simply don't have enough bodies to segregate all of the duties, and so we will have some conflict. But hopefully even in those situations, we are at least aware that we have that conflict. So again, different individuals should be responsible for related activities. All right, documentation procedures. We have some pictures over here of some pre-numbered invoices. Company checks would be another example. It says companies should use pre-numbered documents and all documents should be accounted for. So we've got 123, 4, 5, 6, 7. If we're missing number 125 for whatever reason on these invoices, this is a problem. Because if we don't have invoice number 125, for all we know, that could have been a cash invoice for $1,500. Remove the invoice, pocket the cash. You see the problem? So, documentation procedures, making sure that everything is sequential, very, very important. We might see some additional examples through our handouts and so forth to give you a better idea of documentation procedures. Again, these are all part of the control procedures component of internal control. All right, physical activities or physical controls. Locking your door, time clocks for recording time worked so that we know that the employee was at least there at the beginning and end of their shift. Safes for valuables, television, closed circuit TV, alarms, passwords, so on, locked warehouses. These are all physical controls. Again, another control procedure. And then we have what is referred to as independent internal verification. This is where we use management to hopefully verify what an employee has done. We may have somebody, in fact, we've got an example here. We've got an example of segregation of duties. We have got an accounting employee who's maintaining balances or cash balances per books. And then we've got an assistant cashier who actually has custody of the cash. So we've got segregation of duties going on between these two people. He's got the books, a record of how much cash we should have. This person has the actual cash. And then we've got somebody else over here who's making monthly comparisons to reports to find out if maybe this guy or this guy is not doing his job right. We call this independent but internal verification. Okay? And then last but not least, we have human resource controls, which would include bonding or insuring employees who handle cash. rotating employee duties. This is important so that that we have, for a couple of reasons. We don't want employees getting so capable of something that they're the only ones that know how to do it, and especially because they could die, and then we need somebody else to know how to do it. Requiring vacations, huge thing. Employees who refuse to take vacations are not always workaholics. Sometimes they're up to no good. They don't want to take vacations because they're afraid that their fraud will be uncovered if they leave for whatever reason. And then finally, conduct background checks. Yeah? See the little diagram over here? Okay, so all 6 of those items are control procedures. Control procedures. I think we have one more slide. Okay, the principles of internal control do not include, well, it does include establishment of responsibility. It includes documentation procedures, and it includes independent internal verification. Management is responsible for internal control, but management responsibility is not an internal control principle. Okay, at this time you have all the information you need to answer the questions for handout number 1, and there will be an accompanying video or videos on that handout posted as well.